Welcome to Talk Tickers. It's Halloween, but for Amarin investors, the mood is more trick than treat. You know their latest earnings report? It sent the stock tumbling, almost 4%, closing at a pretty dismal $58, sir.
Yeah, it's a challenging time for Amarin, the Irish-American biopharmaceutical company. You know them for Vascepa. That's the prescription omega-3 fatty acid medication. It's used to treat cardiovascular disease. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into their Q3 2024 earnings call transcript and some recent news to kind of understand what's spooking the market and what it all means for Amarin's future.
Okay, so before we get to the graveyard of bad news, let's start by looking at the silver lining. You know, even with the generic competition looming in the U.S., Amarin has managed to hold on to a 50% market share for Vascepa. Why is that?
Well, Amarin attributes this to a couple of factors. First, Vascepa has some unique properties that set it apart from the generic options, for example. It's a highly purified and concentrated form of omega-3 fatty acids, and it's been extensively studied, proven effective in clinical trials. Second, Amarin has been strategic about securing exclusive rights and formulations for Vascepa, giving them a competitive edge.
So it's not just about the drug itself. It's also about how Amarin has positioned it in the market. Makes sense. Now let's look beyond the U.S. Vascepa. That's what it's known as in some international markets. It's actually seeing some promising growth. They've reported revenue increases in the UK and Spain, and they've recently secured pricing and reimbursement wins in Greece and Portugal.
That's right. The European market is particularly interesting because Amarin has secured extended patent protection for Vascepa there, all the way to 2039. This gives them a much longer runway to generate revenue and build their brand presence.
Now this next bit is HUGE, Amarin's partner in China. Eddingpharm just got regulatory approval to sell Vascepa there to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. We're talking about a country with an enormous population dealing with heart health issues. So this could be a total game changer for Amarin. It's like they just open the doors to a whole new world of possibilities.
Yeah, and to add to the good news, Amarin received a $15 million milestone payment from Eddingpharm this quarter, which further bolsters their financial position.
Okay, so there's definitely some positive momentum. But as that stock drop suggests, it's not all smooth sailing. The company reported total net revenue of $42.3 million for Q3 2024, which is significantly lower than the $66.1 million they pulled in during the same period last year.
Exactly. And that decline is largely due to the intense generic competition in the U.S., which is forcing Amarin to lower their prices. Think of it like this. You're selling lemonade, and suddenly everyone on the block starts doing the same. You've got to lower your prices to stay competitive.
Makes sense. But generic competition isn't the only thing squeezing Amarin's U.S. profits. They're also facing a shift in the market towards Medicare Part D, which comes with higher discount rates for drug manufacturers.
Right. This essentially means that Amarin has to offer bigger discounts to insurers in order to get Vascepa covered under Medicare Part D plans. This eats into their profit margins.
And to make things even more complex, securing reimbursement for Vascepa in Europe is turning out to be a slow and challenging process.
Unfortunately, this reflects a broader issue. Within the pharmaceutical industry, European healthcare systems are known for their stringent cost control measures, and they require extensive evidence of a drug's effectiveness and cost-effectiveness before they're willing to cover it.
So Amarin is facing a real uphill battle on multiple fronts.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. But Amarin isn't just throwing in the towel. They've got a plan, and it hinges on global expansion, particularly in Europe, where they have that extended patent protection we talked about.
Right.
They're essentially betting that Vascepa can achieve blockbuster status outside the U.S.
So how are they planning to make that happen? Because as you mentioned, getting a drug approved and reimbursed in Europe is no walk in the park.
Well, they're taking a multi-pronged approach. First, they're investing heavily in generating new data to support their reimbursement applications in Europe. This includes conducting subgroup analyses of their existing clinical trial data to highlight the benefits of Vascepa in specific patient populations, such as those with acute coronary syndrome.
So they're digging deeper into the data to identify those patients who stand to benefit the most from Vascepa.
Exactly. They're also gathering real-world evidence, which means looking at how Vascepa performs in everyday clinical practice. This kind of data is becoming increasingly important for payers, as it provides a more realistic picture of a drug's effectiveness and value.
So it's like showing, not just telling. And I'm guessing Amarin is hoping to use this data to bolster their arguments for reimbursement.
That's the idea. But data alone isn't enough. They also need to make sure healthcare professionals are aware of the benefits of Vascepa and how to use it effectively. So they're replicating the education and promotion strategy that proved successful in the U.S.
So lots of conferences, presentations,
Mm,
and meetings with doctors.
Precisely. They're also working to build relationships with key opinion leaders in the cardiology community. Those are the influential doctors who can help spread the word about Vascepa.
It's a smart strategy, especially given that Amarin is essentially a one-product company right now. They've even put business development on hold to focus all their resources on making Vascepa a global success. It's a risky move, but it also shows just how confident they are in the potential of this drug.
Yeah, they're going all in. And while it's certainly a gamble, it's not entirely unreasonable. Vascepa addresses a significant unmet need in the cardiovascular disease space. Millions of people around the world are at high risk for heart attacks and strokes, even if they're already taking statins to lower their cholesterol. Vascepa offers a new way to reduce that risk, and that's a powerful message.
Okay, so the potential is there, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Amarin is currently facing delisting from the NASDAQ stock exchange because their share price has been below $1 for an extended period. How critical is regaining compliance for their future? And what are they doing to address this?
Well, it's a serious issue. Being delisted can make it harder for a company to raise capital and attract investors. It can also damage their credibility and make it more difficult to partner with other companies. Amarin has stated that they are actively exploring options to regain NASDAQ compliance, but they haven't provided specifics yet.
So it's a wait-and-see situation. Now, Amarin has an upcoming virtual analyst and investor event scheduled for November 14th, where they said they'll be focusing on the future of the Vascepa franchise. In key geographies like Europe, do you think they'll shed some light on their plans to regain NASDAQ compliance then?
It's certainly possible. They'll be under pressure from analysts and investors to address this issue head-on. And they may use this event to provide more details about their European expansion strategy and how they plan to achieve their ambitious growth targets.
It's definitely an event worth watching. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more thing I want to touch on. While the U.S. market presents many challenges for Amarin, it's also the market they understand best. They've been successful there before. And they're not giving up on it just yet. Right. They're not just sitting back and letting the generics eat their lunch. They're actively working to maintain their presence in the U.S. market, even if it means shifting their focus.
Exactly. Instead of trying to compete on price with the generics, they're doubling down on what makes Vascepa unique. They're focusing on those higher-risk patient populations where Vascepa's benefits are most pronounced, like those with acute coronary syndrome.
So they're becoming more targeted in their approach, focusing on the patients who are most likely to benefit from Vascepa, even in the face of generic competition.
That's exactly right. They're also continuing to invest in research to generate more data that supports the use of Vascepa. In these specific patient populations, this data will be crucial for convincing doctors to continue prescribing Vascepa and for persuading insurers to cover it.
It's a smart strategy. It allows them to carve out a niche in a crowded market. So we wrap up this deep dive into Amarin's Q3 2024 earnings call. What's the key takeaway for investors? Should they be running for the hills or seeing this as a potential buying opportunity?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Amarin is clearly at a crossroads. They're facing some significant challenges, particularly in the U.S. market with the generic competition and the pricing pressures. But they also have some promising opportunities, especially in the international market, with their expansion into Europe and China.
It's high-risk, high-reward scenario.
Exactly. For investors, it comes down to how much risk they're willing to tolerate and how confident they are in Amarin's ability to execute its strategy. They'll need to weigh the potential rewards of international expansion against the risks of continued decline in the U.S. market and the uncertainty surrounding their NASDAQ listing.
Right. Investors will want to pay close attention to Amarin's upcoming investor event on November 14th for more clarity on their plans for the future. It'll be interesting to see how they address the NASDAQ delisting issue and provide more details about their strategy for European expansion.
Absolutely. And of course, we'll continue to track their progress and keep you updated on any major developments.
Thanks for joining us on Talk Tickers for this deep dive into Amarin's Q3 2024 earnings call. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the world of biopharma.